Harlem, New York. 2:47 p.m. Saturday, March 16, 1940. The temperature sits at 28 degrees. Ice coats the windows of Small's Paradise like prison bars. The afternoon light cuts through the smoke-filled air in sharp, cold beams. Bumpy Johnson sits at his usual table in the back corner, reading Machiavelli's The Prince, a cup of black coffee growing cold beside him. He doesn't look up when the door opens. 2:48 p.m. 4 men enter, Italian, expensive overcoats, faces that belong downtown, not uptown. They move with the confidence of men who believe their last names are weapons. At their center walks Carlo Benedetto, a Genovese family enforcer, 36 years old, 5'10", with a scar running from his left ear to his jawline, a souvenir from a debt collection in Newark that went sideways in 1937. Benedetto approaches Bumpy's table like he owns it. Like he owns everything in sight. He stops 3 feet away, close enough to disrespect, far enough to feel safe. Bumpy Johnson. The name comes out flat, like he's reading from a grocery list. I represent the Genovese family. We've been watching your operation. Policy games. Numbers running. Protection services. He pauses, lets the words settle like dust. Mr. Genovese wants his percentage. 40 points on everything you collect north of 110th Street. Starting Monday. The men behind Benedetto spread out. Hands rest inside coat pockets. The message is surgical. This isn't negotiation. It's notification. Bumpy closes his book slowly, sets it down with the precision of a chess master placing a piece. He looks up at Benedetto with eyes that reveal nothing. Clinical, detached, already calculating. 40 points. Bumpy repeats. His voice is quiet, controlled, like he's discussing the weather. On money I earn. In neighborhoods I protect. From people who trust me to keep predators away from their children. Benedetto smiles. It's the smile of a shark that's never met a bigger shark. It's not personal, friend. It's business. You're a smart man. You understand how this works. We have connections. Judges. Cops. Politicians. You've got what, loyal junkies and street corner lookouts? Bumpy stands slowly. The movement is slight, but every person in Small's Paradise feels the shift in atmospheric pressure. I understand exactly how this works, Carlo. You walk into my neighborhood. You threaten my operation. You demand tribute like I'm some amateur who started running dice games last week. Benedetto's smile falters. Something in Bumpy's tone, the use of his first name, the lack of fear, sets off alarm bells in his reptilian brain. Careful, Bumpy. Mr. Genovese doesn't negotiate twice. Monday morning, 40%. Or we start removing obstacles to our business expansion. Permanently. Silence. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. 15 seconds. Bumpy reaches into his jacket. The 4 Italians tense. But Bumpy only pulls out a small notepad and a fountain pen. He writes something carefully. Tears off the page. Folds it once. Extends it to Benedetto. Give this to Vito. Tell him it's my answer to his generous offer. Benedetto takes the paper, doesn't read it, shoves it into his coat pocket. You're making a mistake. No, Bumpy says, settling back into his chair. You already made it. You just don't understand the consequences yet. The Italians leave with the swagger of men who believe they've just conquered territory. Outside, their black Cadillac disappears south toward Little Italy, carrying with it a piece of paper that will change everything. 72 hours later, Carlo Benedetto will receive a package at his home. Inside won't be a severed body part or a death threat. It will be something far more terrifying. Proof that Bumpy Johnson knows secrets that could destroy the Genovese family from within. Evidence so damaging that Vito Genovese himself will personally call off every operation targeting Harlem for the next decade. The story of how Carlo Benedetto went from demanding tribute to begging for mercy is a masterclass in psychological warfare that the five families have spent 80 years trying to erase from history. If you enjoy these deep dives into the underworld, you can support the channel by buying me a coffee using the link in the description. Your support keeps these investigations alive. Now, let's go back to March 13th, 1940. In March 1940, Harlem stands as the last sovereign territory in New York City's criminal empire. Every other neighborhood has bent the knee. The Bronx answers to the Lucchese organization. Brooklyn belongs to the Prefassi and Mangano operations. Queens has been carved between competing Italian interests. Even the Irish gangs on the West Side have learned to pay tribute or disappear. But north of 110th Street, the map changes. Harlem remains independent, an island of black enterprise surrounded by a rising tide of Italian ambition. The engine of this independence is the policy racket. $50,000 moves through Harlem's numbers operations every single week. It flows like a river of nickels, dimes, and quarters from the hands of factory workers, domestics, porters, and shopkeepers who bet their lunch money on three-digit combinations that might change everything. The cash moves in brown envelopes, cigar boxes, hollowed-out books, under baby blankets in prams pushed by tired mothers who look like they're running errands. It passes through barbershops, bars, tailors, and janitors' closets. Policy banks collect the bets, calculate the odds, and distribute the winnings. Every transaction generates profit that stays within the community, untaxed by downtown syndicates, uncontrolled by Italian surnames. At the center of this system sits Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson. To the police precincts and white newspapers, he is a menace. A Negro racketeer who corrupts his own people. But to the residents of Harlem, he is something different. He is the only authority that functions, the only government that gives a damn whether they live or die. When Mrs. Washington's husband dies in a construction accident, leaving her with 4 children and $17 in savings, Bumpy pays for the funeral. Full service. Mahogany casket. Flowers. A reception with food enough to feed the mourners. He doesn't ask for repayment. When white landlords try to evict families for being 3 weeks behind on rent, Bumpy covers the payments and leaves clear warnings that future harassment will carry consequences. When the Goldstein brothers attempt to muscle their way into ownership of 3 barbershops on 125th Street, threatening black owners with arson unless they sell at 10 cents on the dollar, Bumpy sends 2 men to have a conversation. The brothers leave Harlem that same afternoon. Their abandoned car is found in the Hudson River 3 days later. This is his method: protection, support, calculated consequences for those who prey on his people. He moves with military precision learned in reform schools and prisons, where survival required understanding power structures and exploiting weaknesses. His office is not a flashy nightclub or restaurant. It's a back room behind a modest business, where he sits at a plain wooden table, reading books most gangsters have never heard of, calmly balancing the ledger of who gets protected, who gets warned, and who gets eliminated. The community's loyalty is reinforced by this balance of fear and generosity. They know that if you keep your business clean and your word solid, Bumpy Johnson will keep predators away from your door. They also know what happens to those who betray him. The story circulates in hushed tones of a man who tried to skim from Bumpy's operation in 1938. He didn't just lose his position. He lost 3 fingers, his front teeth, and the right to ever work in Harlem again. He now shines shoes in a neighborhood where no one says his name. That autonomy is exactly what makes Harlem a target for the Genovese family. By 1940, Vito Genovese has spent 5 years consolidating Italian operations downtown. They control waterfront unions, judges, police captains, and city councilmen. Their operations generate millions annually from gambling, loan sharking, and labor racketeering. But Genovese looks at the map of New York and sees one territory that refuses to pay tribute. Harlem represents more than money. It represents defiance. An example that encourages others to resist. Their expansion strategy is systematic and predatory. They don't negotiate. They absorb. The family has calculated that a 40% tax on Harlem's numbers would generate $20,000 weekly, over $1 million annually, in pure profit. Money that could fund their move into legitimate construction and labor unions. Money that transforms street-level gambling into corporate-level power. First, they probe the edges. They don't approach Bumpy directly. They target smaller Harlem operators, men with ambition but no real infrastructure to withstand pressure. In November 1939, they visit Marcus Sweet Williams, who runs policy games in Sugar Hill. Two Italians speak quietly, but carry the confidence of men who've watched people die. They explain that the family is offering protection in exchange for 30% of his weekly take. Sweet resists briefly. Then one night his teenage son is cornered, roughed up, and left with a broken rib and a message. Your father pays, or you don't walk next time. Within 48 hours, envelopes start moving downtown. In January 1940, they approach Raymond Cole, who controls numbers running between 135th and 145th Streets. Raymond doesn't even wait for violence. He gets phone calls, names of judges, detectives, politicians, stories about what happens to people who say no. One morning he finds his front window shattered, his safe tampered with, but not emptied. Just touched. He understands the implication. 25% of his take now belongs to men who have never set foot on his block. In February, they visit Samuel Green, an independent operator near the Polo Grounds. Samuel believes he can ride it out. He has cousins in numbers, friends in bars, a few men with guns. He tells the Genovese representatives that he's been running his operation for 12 years and won't hand over his earnings to downtown gangsters. Samuel Green vanishes on February 18th. No body. No funeral. No explanation. His policy stations are quietly absorbed by associates who understand the new reality. But Bumpy Johnson is not Marcus Williams, or Raymond Cole, or Samuel Green. He doesn't respond to disrespect with immediate violence. He responds with systematic destruction that leaves nothing standing. When a rival operator tried to expand into his territory in 1938, Bumpy didn't just eliminate the competitor. He systematically dismantled the man's entire organization over 6 weeks, removing each lieutenant, each enforcer, each runner, until the rival stood alone and powerless. Then Bumpy offered him a choice: leave New York or die in it. The man chose Philadelphia. Stories like this circulate through the underworld. Bumpy Johnson maintains loyalty through generosity and fear through disproportionate consequences. The community benefits from policy games that live in the same buildings where bets are taken. They understand that surrendering 40% of their income to the Genovese family means starving their own neighborhoods to feed men downtown who never lifted a hand to protect them. For the Italians, that 40% has a different purpose. It isn't just greed. It's fuel for complete monopoly. With Harlem's money, they intend to purchase more political protection, expand into legitimate businesses, and achieve total control over organized crime in New York City. If Bumpy Johnson pays tribute, every other independent operator will fall in line. On paper, it's simple. Bumpy pays, they profit. But there is a problem they cannot see from downtown. Bumpy Johnson doesn't calculate like a frightened independent. He studies patterns, motivations, weaknesses. He understands that men who believe they own the city often leave their own doors unlocked. March 14th, 1940. 2 days before Carlo Benedetto will walk into Small's paradise with his ultimatum, Bumpy receives quiet confirmation from one of his informants. An unexpected source, Vincent Torino, a nervous bookkeeper who handles financial records for Genovese operations in Little Italy. Vincent owes Bumpy a debt that transcends business. In 1937, 3 men tried to rob Vincent's family store. Bumpy happened to be walking past. He intervened, sent the robbers to the hospital with injuries that required extended recovery. Vincent never forgot. Now he's calling with information that changes everything. Carlo Benedetto, the enforcer being sent to collect tribute from Harlem, has been skimming money from Genovese collections for 8 months. $12,000. Maybe more. Vincent has the records. He's terrified. Helping Bumpy means betraying his own people. But the debt must be honored. Bumpy listens in silence. Asks 3 questions. Confirms the details. He doesn't smile. He doesn't celebrate. He just reaches for the phone, dials a number that connects him to that cramped back office in Little Italy, and waits for the line to pick up. A nervous voice answers. Pronto? Vincent, Bumpy says evenly. It's time to settle that debt you owe me. Carlo Benedetto walks out of Small's paradise wearing his Italian surname like armor. In his world, that name represents more than heritage. It's a bulletproof vest woven from generations of violence and political corruption. He has spent 12 years watching judges dismiss charges, police captains lose evidence, and witnesses develop sudden amnesia when Genovese business requires it. To Carlo, Harlem is just another territory that hasn't learned to genuflect properly. The black gamblers, street operators, and storefront bosses will fold like everyone else once they understand the machinery of organized crime that controls every lever of power in New York City. He slides into the back seat of the waiting Cadillac with theatrical satisfaction. 3 blocks south of Small's paradise, the performance ends. No audience. No one to impress. Just Carlo and the folded paper burning a hole in his coat pocket. He retrieves it with casual arrogance, expecting some pathetic plea for mercy or counteroffer that demonstrates weakness. The handwriting is precise, almost mechanical. 12 words that detonate like grenades in his chest. Ask Vincent Torino about the missing $12,000. Then ask yourself how I know about it. Carlo's hands go numb. The paper trembles slightly. In a single sentence, Bumpy Johnson has named the exact amount Carlo has been skimming from Genovese operations over 8 months. Not an estimate. Not a guess. The specific sum he has siphoned from collection routes in Newark and the Bronx to fund high-stakes poker games in Atlantic City basement clubs, and maintain Angela Russo, a 24-year-old seamstress who believes he's a successful businessman, not a married enforcer, stealing from the most. Dangerous crime family in New York. The theft system was meticulous. Carlo altered collection logs, destroyed original receipts, and ensured discrepancies appeared as accounting errors rather than systematic betrayal. Vincent Torino processed the falsified paperwork without questioning, because questioning Carlo Benedetto meant risking the kind of violence that left permanent reminders. The arrangement was invisible. Perfect. Until this moment. Carlo understands immediately what this means. The Italian mob operates under codes refined over generations. Loyalty is absolute. Betrayal is unforgivable. But there are gradations of sin. Killing rivals is business. Stealing from the family is treason punishable by systematic humiliation, followed by brutal execution, designed as permanent warning. Carlo has participated in 3 such killings. Men stripped naked, beaten with pipes, left in public locations where their bodies send clear messages about the consequences of internal theft. The note proves Bumpy has penetrated Genovese operations at levels that should be impossible. He doesn't just know about the money, he knows Vincent's name, suggesting access to financial records kept locked in Little Italy safes. If this information reaches Vito Genovese through proper channels, Carlo's life expectancy becomes measured in hours. By evening, Carlo sits across from Genovese in the smoke-filled back room on Thompson Street. He lies with the desperation of a drowning man, describing Bumpy's arrogance, his dismissive attitude toward Italian authority, his refusal to show proper respect. He frames the encounter as an insult-demanding response, while never mentioning the note crumpled in his pocket. He thinks he's untouchable, Carlo says, voice steady despite fear coiling in his stomach. He believes Harlem gives him immunity. If we let this stand, everyone will start thinking they can say no. Genovese listens without expression, tapping a cigar against crystal. In his world, disrespect cannot stand. It spreads like virus if not cauterized. We send a message, he decides finally. Something visible. Something that demonstrates what happens when people refuse our generosity. The order is surgical and devastating. One of Bumpy's policy banks will burn. March 18th. Not the main operation. Something significant enough to hurt, but small enough to suggest patience. Carlo leaves believing he has successfully deflected disaster. But 4 miles north, Bumpy Johnson sets down his telephone, already knowing the order has been given. His intelligence network moves faster than Italian Cadillacs. He turns to his lieutenant with instructions that defy conventional gangster logic. "Let them burn it," Bumpy says calmly. "Empty the building, move the money, and make sure Vincent gets the photographs." The basement of Abyssinian Baptist Church smells like old hymnals and floor wax. March 17th, 10 o'clock in the morning. Vincent Torino descends the narrow wooden stairs with the careful steps of a man walking toward his own execution. His hands shake despite being buried deep in coat pockets. Sweat beads along his hairline, even though the basement air carries the chill of early spring. He has spent 3 sleepless nights weighing impossible choices, knowing that every decision leads to a grave. Help Bumpy Johnson and betray the Genovese family. Refuse and dishonor the debt that has defined his character for 3 years. Bumpy sits at a folding table beneath a single hanging bulb, reading a newspaper with the casual attention of a man waiting for breakfast service. No bodyguards crowd the small space. No weapons rest on the table. He doesn't need visible muscle. His reputation fills the room like smoke. He looks up when Vincent reaches the bottom step and gestures to the empty chair across from him without speaking. Vincent sits because his legs can no longer support his weight. The silence stretches between them, heavy with the weight of what they both understand. In Vincent's world, being seen in Harlem with Ellsworth Johnson is a death sentence signed in triplicate. But debts of honor transcend the rigid racial boundaries that govern 1940s New York, and Vincent remembers August 1937 with crystalline clarity. 3 men had entered his family's grocery store on Mulberry Street at closing time. His father was counting the register. His mother was sweeping behind the counter. Vincent was restocking shelves with tomorrow's bread delivery. The men wore cloth masks and carried tire irons with the confidence of predators who had never met anything more dangerous than frightened shopkeepers. They demanded cash, jewelry, anything valuable. When Vincent's father moved too slowly toward the register, one of them swung the iron into his ribs with force that cracked bone and sent the old man crashing into a display of canned goods. Bumpy Johnson happened to be walking past, visiting a contact who lived 2 blocks south. He heard the commotion, looked through the window, and made a calculation that defied every rule of New York's racial hierarchy. He entered the store moving with speed that seemed impossible for a man his size. The first attacker went down with a shattered jaw before he understood what was happening. The second took a knee to the spine that left him gasping on linoleum. The third ran and kept running until he reached Brooklyn. Bumpy helped Vincent's father to a chair, told Vincent's mother to call an ambulance, and disappeared before police sirens echoed off tenement walls. Vincent found him 2 days later to offer thanks and repayment. Bumpy refused money, but said something Vincent has never forgotten. "You don't owe me cash. You owe me honor. Someday I might need something only you can provide. When that day comes, you'll know what to do." That day has arrived. Vincent reaches into his worn leather satchel with trembling fingers and removes a manila envelope thick with documentation he has been gathering for 8 months. Financial ledgers showing Carlo's systematic alterations. Photographs he took himself during lunch breaks, following Carlo to meetings with Atlantic City loan sharks outside basement gambling clubs. Copies of falsified receipts with Carlo's handwriting visible in the margins. Bank deposit slips for accounts Carlo maintains under his mistress Angela Russo's name. 8 months of methodical theft documented with accountant precision, gathered by a man who understood that knowledge might someday become currency. "This is everything," Vincent whispers, his voice barely audible above the sound of his own heartbeat. "If Mr. Genovese sees this, Carlo dies, and anyone who helped gather it dies with him." Bumpy spreads the documents across the table methodically, studying each page with the focus of a prosecutor building an airtight case. The evidence is devastating. $12,000 systematically diverted from family operations, not lost through carelessness or accounting errors, but stolen with deliberate precision. Each falsified receipt tells the same story. Carlo Benedetto has been funding his gambling addiction and maintaining his secret mistress by stealing from the most dangerous crime family in New York. His strategy crystallizes with each piece of evidence. He will not kill Carlo Benedetto. That would start a war requiring resources, lives, and attention that could be better spent protecting Harlem. Instead, he will weaponize the Genovese family's own codes against them. Internal theft demands internal punishment. By exposing Carlo to Vito Genovese, Bumpy transforms an external threat into an internal crisis. The family will devour its own while Bumpy watches from a safe distance, his hands clean, his message unmistakable. "I can destroy you without firing a single shot." "You've given me exactly what I need," Bumpy says, carefully returning documents to the envelope. "Go home. Burn anything that connects you to this meeting. If anyone asks where you were this morning, you were visiting your sick aunt in Brooklyn. She'll confirm if necessary." Vincent stands on legs that barely function. "Mr. Johnson, they're planning something tonight. I heard Carlo talking about teaching you a lesson." "I know," Bumpy replies with unsettling calm. "Let them teach it." 6:30 that evening. Flames erupt from a 3-story brownstone on 132nd Street that serves as one of Bumpy's policy collection points. The fire spreads with chemical assistance, gasoline-fed acceleration that sends orange light dancing across surrounding buildings. Neighbors pour into the street expecting casualties, tragedy, bodies carried from smoking ruins. Instead, they find an empty building. Every piece of furniture removed. Every financial record relocated. Every worker safely positioned blocks away with full pay and clear instructions. But stationed across the street, hidden in a second-floor window, are 2 men with cameras documenting everything. The Cadillac that delivers the arsonists. The faces of men who light the fire. The license plates. The escape route. Every detail captured on film that will serve as evidence of Genovese aggression against Harlem operations. Later that night, Bumpy sits at his desk, compiling the weapon that will cut into the Genovese structure like a surgeon's scalpel. He arranges Vincent's financial records chronologically, photographs of Carlo's meetings with loan sharks, bank statements showing accounts in Angela Russo's name, copies of falsified receipts with notations explaining each discrepancy, fresh photographs of the evening's arson attack. Everything organized with legal precision, presented like a prosecutor's case file that leaves no room for doubt or denial. He takes a piece of heavy cream stationery and unscrews his fountain pen. The ink is black. The handwriting is measured, elegant, controlled. "Mr. Genovese," he writes, "I found this rat in your organization. Consider it a gesture of respect between professionals. The 40% you requested? Take it from what Carlo stole. The message operates on multiple levels simultaneously. It demonstrates Bumpy's intelligence capabilities while offering Genovese a face-saving solution. It transforms territorial conflict into internal house cleaning. It proves that Bumpy can penetrate Genovese operations, extract damaging information, and choose mercy over destruction. The subtext screams louder than any threat. I could have used this information to destroy you publicly. Instead, I'm giving you the opportunity to handle your business privately." Bumpy seals the envelope with red wax, pressing his ring into the soft surface. The package will be delivered tomorrow morning by Vincent's elderly aunt, ensuring cultural authenticity and reducing suspicion. He sets it on his desk and returns to reading Machiavelli, understanding that the prince who wins without fighting has achieved the highest form of victory. The war is over. The Genovese family just doesn't know it yet. The basement of Abyssinian Baptist Church carries the weight of decades in its air. March 17th, 10 o'clock in the morning. Vincent Torino descends the narrow wooden stairs like a man walking toward his own execution, each step echoing in the confined space that smells of old hymnals and floor wax. Sweat beads along his hairline despite the morning chill, seeping through stone walls. 3 sleepless nights have carved hollow spaces under his eyes as he wrestled with impossible choices, knowing that every decision leads to a grave. Bumpy Johnson sits at a folding table beneath a single hanging bulb, reading his newspaper with the casual attention of a man waiting for breakfast. No bodyguards crowd the small space. No weapons rest on the table. His reputation fills the room like smoke, making such displays unnecessary. He gestures to the empty chair without looking up, and Vincent collapses into it because his legs can no longer support his weight. The debt between them transcends the rigid racial boundaries governing 1940s New York. August 1937 remains crystalline in Vincent's memory. 3 masked men with tire irons had entered his family's grocery store at closing time. When his father moved too slowly toward the register, one attacker swung iron into ribs with bone-cracking force. Bumpy Johnson happened to be walking past, heard the commotion, and made a calculation that defied every rule of the city's social hierarchy. He entered moving with impossible speed, leaving the first attacker with a shattered jaw, the second gasping on linoleum with a damaged spine, and the third running toward Brooklyn. 2 days later, when Vincent found him to offer repayment, Bumpy refused money but said something unforgettable. "You don't owe me cash. You owe me honor. Someday I might need something only you can provide." That day has arrived. Vincent removes a manila envelope from his worn leather satchel with trembling fingers. 8 months of documentation. Financial ledgers showing Carlo's systematic alterations. Photographs taken during lunch breaks, following Carlo to meetings with Atlantic City loan sharks. Copies of falsified receipts with Carlo's handwriting in the margins. Bank deposit slips for accounts maintained under Angela Russo's name. $18,000 systematically diverted from family operations, documented with accountant precision by a man who understood that knowledge might someday become currency. Bumpy spreads the documents methodically, studying each page with prosecutorial focus. His strategy crystallizes with each piece of evidence. He will not kill Carlo Benedetto. That would start a war requiring resources better spent protecting Harlem. Instead, he will weaponize the Genovese family's own codes against them, transforming external threat into internal crisis. 24 hours later, the weapon arrives at Thompson Street via Maria Torino, a 72-year-old widow, whose black mourning clothes and shopping bag render her invisible through familiarity. She hands the sealed envelope to the doorman with instructions for personal delivery to Mr. Genovese, then shuffles toward Bleecker Street before anyone thinks to ask questions. Vito Genovese opens the package in his private office, expecting routine correspondence. The cream stationery catches his attention first. Quality paper. Expensive. Not the kind used by desperate men. He reads Bumpy's note twice, Mr. Genovese. I found this rat in your organization. Consider it a gesture of respect between professionals. The 40% you requested? Take it from what Carlo stole. Initial disbelief transforms into cold calculation as he reviews Vincent's meticulous documentation. The evidence is overwhelming, structured with federal indictment precision. Within hours, internal investigation confirms everything. The theft totals $18,000 over 10 months. Carlo has been systematically diverting family money to fund gambling debts exceeding $30,000 and maintain a mistress who believes she's dating a successful importer. The deeper significance becomes clear. Carlo didn't just steal money. He created vulnerability that could collapse the family if exploited by law enforcement or rivals. He made the Genovese operation appear weak, penetrable. Most damning of all, a black gangster from Harlem knew more about internal finances than Genovese himself. At 4:15 p.m., Carlo receives the summons. He arrives knowing something is wrong but hoping it isn't fatal. The office feels colder than usual. Genovese sits behind his desk with evidence spread like autopsy photographs. He presents the documentation methodically, giving Carlo opportunity to explain each discrepancy. Carlo's defense crumbles in stages. Denial collapses when Genovese produces original ledgers matching Vincent's copies perfectly. Blaming Vincent fails when captains confirm the bookkeeper passed interrogation. Partial confession dissolves under photographic evidence of Carlo depositing cash into Angela Russo's account. Finally, complete admission arrives with tears and desperate pleas for mercy. Genovese faces a dilemma that complicates traditional solutions. The code demands death for internal theft. But killing Carlo would start war with someone who clearly possesses intelligence capabilities that penetrate their most secure operations. Bumpy has demonstrated that information surpasses violence, that exposure destroys more effectively than bullets. The decision prioritizes strategy over vengeance. Carlo is stripped of rank, exiled to New Jersey under supervision, banned from New York operations permanently. He will repay through labor, living his cautionary tale about betrayal's consequences. As Carlo leaves broken and weeping, Genovese turns to his lieutenants with instructions that will reshape everything. Call the captains, he orders quietly. Tomorrow morning. We need to discuss the Harlem situation. March 19th arrives with the weight of reassessment hanging over the Thompson Street Social Club. Vito Genovese sits at the head of a mahogany table surrounded by 5 captains who have spent decades building the most powerful criminal organization in New York. The usual swagger is absent, replaced by cold calculation. On the table lies Bumpy's envelope, a physical reminder of their vulnerability. These men understand power through violence, corruption, and systematic intimidation. But the Carlo Benedetto situation has introduced a variable that defies their traditional calculations. Genovese spreads Vincent's documentation without preamble. Financial records, surveillance photographs, bank statements, arson documentation showing their own men caught on camera. Each captain reviews the evidence in silence, understanding immediately what it represents. Bumpy Johnson has penetrated their operations at levels that should be impossible for an outsider, particularly a black gangster operating from Harlem with none of their political connections or institutional support. The strategic implications crystallize through careful analysis. Bumpy possesses intelligence capabilities that reach into their most secure financial operations. He identified Carlo's theft before internal audits caught discrepancies. He knew about Vincent Torino, a low-level bookkeeper whose name shouldn't appear on any outsider's radar. He predicted the firebombing with enough advance notice to evacuate buildings and position photographers. Most disturbing of all, he chose to expose Carlo rather than exploit the information for blackmail or public humiliation. This demonstrates sophistication that transforms him from territorial nuisance into legitimate threat. War with Bumpy Johnson means fighting an enemy who knows their secrets, controls territory with genuine community support, and operates with strategic patience that rivals their own. The community's loyalty to Bumpy isn't purchased through fear alone. It's earned through protection, support, and shared identity that transcends simple business relationships. The economic calculations reinforce strategic concerns. Harlem generates approximately $50,000 weekly through policy operations deeply embedded in community infrastructure. Forced tribute would create resistance that reduces profitability while requiring constant enforcement. Conquering Harlem means occupying hostile territory where every resident becomes potential informant for their opponent. One captain voices the obvious solution. We could kill him. Send enough men, overwhelm his protection, eliminate the problem permanently. The suggestion hangs in cigar smoke until Genovese responds with cold pragmatism. And then what? We occupy Harlem with soldiers who don't understand the culture, can't tell friends from enemies? Meanwhile, he's already demonstrated that our internal operations leak information. How many more Vincents exist? How many of our people owe him debts we don't know about? The mathematics of violence suddenly favor negotiation. Bumpy has created a situation where destroying him costs more than accommodating him. The captains reach consensus through nods and grim silence. Harlem remains independent. The expansion strategy pivots toward accommodation. March 20th. Anthony Strollo approaches Small's Paradise, carrying authorization to negotiate. Not Carlo Benedetto with his arrogance and ultimatums, but a captain known for diplomatic skill and strategic thinking. He requests a private meeting with the respect due to an equal, not a subordinate. Bumpy agrees, selecting neutral territory, a quiet restaurant near Columbus Circle where both parties can speak without audience. The negotiation unfolds with mutual recognition of demonstrated capabilities. Strollo acknowledges that the Genovese family underestimated Bumpy's intelligence network and strategic sophistication. Bumpy acknowledges that direct conflict would be costly regardless of outcome. They discuss territorial boundaries with diplomatic precision. Genovese operations will stay completely out of Harlem policy games, numbers running and protection rackets. No tribute, no percentage, no interference. In exchange, Bumpy agrees to occasional intelligence sharing when it serves mutual interests. Information about rival families expanding into disputed territories. Warnings about law enforcement operations that might affect both organizations. The arrangement transforms potential enemies into cautious allies bound by pragmatic self-interest rather than loyalty or fear. The psychological victory surpasses any territorial conquest. Bumpy has proven that information warfare surpasses physical violence, that strategic patience defeats impulsive aggression, that understanding your enemy's vulnerabilities matters more than matching their firepower. 3 days later, a delivery arrives at Bumpy's office. A wooden crate containing a bottle of 1928 Barolo, one of the finest Italian wines produced before Prohibition. The accompanying note is handwritten on Genovese personal stationery, "To Mutual Understanding VG." Bumpy examines the bottle carefully, appreciating the gesture's multiple meanings. It acknowledges his victory while maintaining Genovese dignity. He doesn't open the wine. Instead, he places it on a shelf in his office where it remains visible to everyone who enters. The bottle becomes a monument to a specific truth. Respect isn't demanded through threats or extracted through violence. It's demonstrated through strength and intelligence, earned through actions that prove you understand the game better than those who wrote the rules. News travels through New York's underworld not by telegram or telephone, but through the sudden absence of conflict, the quiet withdrawal of soldiers, and the silence where gunfire was expected. Within days of the March accommodation, word spreads through policy banks, social clubs, and after-hours establishments where criminals conduct business. The Genovese family, architects of political corruption and systematic violence, backed down from Bumpy Johnson. Not through negotiated compromise where both sides claim victory, but through complete capitulation that reshapes the territorial map of organized crime in America. The story circulates with whispered precision. Details get embellished with each retelling. But the core truth remains unchanged. Bumpy Johnson exposed internal theft, predicted organizational moves, and demonstrated intelligence penetration so complete that continuing conflict meant risking total exposure. The Underworld operates on reputation built through demonstrated capability, and Bumpy's reputation transforms overnight from regional operator to strategic genius who defeated the most powerful Italian crime family without firing a single shot. In Harlem, the community reaction carries visceral significance. Residents who bet nickels on policy numbers understand they're protected by someone who outthought the most dangerous gangsters in America, using nothing but information and strategic patience. Barbershops, corner stores, and policy stations all carry the same undercurrent of quiet pride. Shopkeepers know that when Italian collectors pass through Harlem, they steer clear of Bumpy's operations. Policy writers understand their envelopes travel shorter distances, profits cycling back into funeral costs, rent, and community protection, rather than disappearing downtown to fund someone else's empire. The precedent established in March 1940 draws invisible lines across New York that remain inviolate for decades. Other Italian families, Lucchese, Bonanno, Colombo, Gambino, recognize Harlem as Bumpy's sovereign territory through unspoken agreement. They examine the Genovese calculus and reach identical conclusions. Attempting encroachment means facing not just his soldiers, but his intelligence network capable of reaching into their books, their banks, their bedrooms. By 1945, Bumpy controls the most profitable black criminal enterprise in New York without Italian interference, generating millions annually from policy operations that fund political influence and business expansion into legitimate ventures. Individual fates trace the mathematics of loyalty and betrayal with surgical precision. Carlo Benedetto receives punishment crueler than death, irrelevance. Exiled to New Jersey under constant supervision, stripped of rank and respect, he spends his remaining years running errands for captains who treat him like contaminated liability. The man who walked into Small's paradise believing Italian surnames meant invincibility dies forgotten in a rented room above a Jersey City bar in 1952. His obituary limited to a single line about natural causes. Vincent Torino receives different treatment. Bumpy understands that loyalty must be rewarded with the same precision that betrayal gets punished. Within weeks, Vincent relocates to Philadelphia with enough money to start a legitimate accounting business, serving small merchants who need bookkeeping services. The transition is clean, untraceable, allowing Vincent to escape New York with life and dignity intact. He never speaks about his role in the affair, but names his first son Ellsworth in quiet tribute. The broader lesson transcends individual victory or territorial control. In 1940s New York's Underworld, where violence typically determines outcomes and muscle settles disputes, Bumpy Johnson proved that information surpasses physical force, that strategy matters more than firepower, that understanding enemy vulnerabilities defeats superior numbers and political connections. Years later, explaining his philosophy, Bumpy summarizes the victory with historians' detachment. They came to Harlem thinking muscle meant power. I showed them that knowledge means survival. But the ultimate revelation remains hidden from public knowledge, known only to Carlo Benedetto and those who examined Bumpy's original note with sufficient attention. That folded paper handed across the table at Small's Paradise contained more than knowledge of past theft. It included prediction of future meetings Carlo hadn't yet arranged, decisions he hadn't made, actions he hadn't taken. Bumpy wasn't just documenting history, he was predicting tomorrow with intelligence penetration that reached beyond surveillance into something approaching press science. That realization terrified the Genovese family more than any weapon they possessed. The truth that defined Bumpy Johnson's legend crystallizes in this understanding. He didn't win by being the most violent. He won by being the most informed. In a world where gangsters measured power through body counts, he proved that the deadliest weapon isn't a gun. It's knowledge about when your enemy will pull the trigger before they've decided to reach for their holster.